First Tee is all about teaching values and life skills through golf to kids. And we're all about that, and we want to do it with the kids that don't otherwise have a chance. And that's really when my eyes were opened to the challenges that the kids don't have, these opportunities that I just took for granted. Like, it wrecked me, honestly. If God's got a plan, you're part of it. Trust it. Because if you try to get a stranglehold on your life, it's not going to go well for you.
Well, welcome to the Engineered Success Podcast, where we talk to entrepreneurs, business owners, and leaders just like you and I who are trying to understand really the definition of success and what stories take us to that final destination. So today, I'm excited to have Tyler in the studio telling his story and what's got him to where he's at today. And Tyler, I think that there is part of your story and kind of what you're doing today that people might just define like that is success in what you're doing. Man, that's my dream, right?
Yeah.
And so Tyler, excited to have you in the studio today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So why I said that is you're doing some golfing today, right? And you're spending time, on the greens and behind the tee. And a lot of people are like, okay, tell me the story of how you got into what you're doing today and how you're spending so much time to do that. I know that's not all you're doing, and I'll unpack it. But a little teaser there for those that are curious.
Yeah, we get it all the time on our staff at First Tee. Like, oh, wow, you just like go out and play golf with kids?
Of course.
Tough job, right? Which, hey, yeah, God's been good. It's a phenomenal job, but it is a small portion of what we're doing for sure. But it's been a ton of fun. And yeah, First Tee is all about teaching values and life skills through golf to kids. And we're all about that, and we want to do it with the kids that don't otherwise have a chance, right? How do we give students an opportunity, kids an opportunity that they might not otherwise have for whatever reason that might be? It might be income reasons, it might be background, gender, all these things that kind of come with the territory of being around the game of golf, which has been a long time kind of like, hey, this is for white guys to go have a good time, right? And so we're really about trying to make sure that anybody and everybody has that opportunity to learn through golf. It's just the platform. So these life skills that we're teaching, like goal setting and how to work with other people and where you're trying to head, that type of stuff is really what we're after. And yeah, I'm an avid golfer, so I think it's a great context to teach that. But ultimately, we're after like building up high character, high integrity young men and women. And that's what we're after. And it's been a ton of fun being able to do it now for almost 14 years.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I'm excited to learn more about that and dive a little bit deeper into how you're teaching those skills to those that maybe aren't getting those skills in other ways. Yeah. But first, I'm curious on the journey that got you so passionate about this and becoming an avid golfer and just wanting to pour into kids in this way. So let's back up to your childhood. Let's start from the very beginning. Tell me a little bit about the environment that you were born and raised in, a little bit about your family dynamics and your parents and things like that. And that'll help set the framework for the rest of your story.
Okay. Yeah. So I grew up in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, born and raised in the same house all the way through. Two awesome parents that love Jesus, raised us up in the church. And I'm the youngest of three. I've got two older sisters. And so, I got dragged to a lot of different athletic events and that type of thing. But the community was always there, whether it be at church, whether it be at school, really stable family home, like incredibly blessed and fortunate for the way I was raised. I was pretty quiet as a kid, and I'm the trailer of the family, and so rarely was I chatting a lot, but I was absorbing a lot. I was a kid that was a rule follower all the way going up, right? You tell me something to do, I'm going to probably do it. And so, but thankfully, I had parents that really poured into me, that cared deeply about me. Both working parents, both I would say, probably weren't thrilled with their vocation when I was young, with their job. And so I think a lot of when I think about how do I get to where I'm at, it's about watching their kind of lack of fulfillment and making really critical decisions in their own career journey to say like, hey, what you do for work, like it's more than just a paycheck, and you want to be in something that you feel fulfilled in and you feel called to as a believer. And so my dad transitioned to kind of being a cog in the wheel at an architecture firm to being a partner and a kind of solo practitioner and architect. My mom, ended up doing a lot of different things after her kind of formal career, but watching them and how they kind of grappled with that, but still also just leaned into all the things that you needed as a kid. Like my dad coached me in every sport that I can think of
Mhm.
as long as he could, like as far as like the knowledge that he had, right? And so the flexibility around doing something you're passionate about, but also finding the time to pour into your family, pour into your church. Like I had two really good examples of that, and it definitely shaped how I viewed kind of career aspirations or what I wanted to do or how I wanted to impact the world versus I think plenty of people, they just like, hey, job's a paycheck, right?
Mm.
And there's value to that. You have to do that. But I just came in with a different perspective, I think, based on watching my parents as a kid.
Yeah, and you're mentioning watching your parents as a kid and the way that, they displayed certain things to you.
Mm.
I know it's easy for me when I think about this, it's easier for me when I think about this to go back and kind of reflect as a child and just kind of say, okay, these are the things that my parents were doing. I probably observed these things. But do you recall you actually, seeing and observing, and as a child you were like, okay, you were acknowledging that, or it's more of like,
Mm.
okay, now that I think back, this is what was going on.
Yeah, I don't think in the moment as a child, I was really absorbing that, right? But there were certain things that my parents were constantly saying about, like, how do you find something that you're passionate about and you care about, that they were living out and working out. And so those things stuck with me when I entered like college. So I came to Grand Rapids to go to Calvin. I was fortunate that the golf team was pretty lousy when I came, so I was able to jump onto the golf team. I'm a solid golfer, not a spectacular golfer. And that helped shape my journey there at Calvin, again, around vocation and calling and what are you supposed to go to. And I think for me, post college, kind of winding down college career was really where God started moving a lot in my life, because up until that point, the path was pretty well charted out, and
Mm,
I was fine with that. I wasn't somebody that was trying to break the mold. But when you kind of wind down your collegiate career as a student, in my case as an athlete as well, and there's not a clear, like, this is the next step that you
mhm,
take, it was terrifying for me, to be perfectly honest. And I had, it really was a lot of soul searching around the desire for me to have control and want to know what was next, and also releasing that and understanding that, like, God's going to use this for his good, even though I'm extremely uncomfortable with
mm.
where I'm at and the uncertainty about what's next.
Oh, thanks for giving some insight into that. And I'm curious, backing up even back to your parents and you observing them, and they were pouring in, saying these certain things to you. Do you feel like they were doing that intentionally with the understanding of, hey, I'm experiencing this today. I want to, help in this scenario. I want to make sure that this story gets across, or is it something where they just maybe unintentionally were just kind of saying that?
No, I think it was pretty intentional. My because they were experiencing kind of a lack of fulfillment when they were working for other people and didn't have flexibility, or maybe had a poor boss at the time. Like, they were kind of always leaning into, like, what do you care about? What do you want to do? What are you passionate about? And I think it was because they were living it daily and they were making some decisions, from like having that steady paycheck, but not a lot of fulfillment, to having to trust God and, like, hey, I'm going to go out on my own and I don't know where the next paycheck or the next bill is coming from, right? In my case of my dad, it was lots of ebbs and flows from an income perspective. He could have a phenomenal year and then the well could run dry. And so there's a lot of faith and trust, and watching them kind of navigate that was really impactful for me, especially as I was in middle school and high school and starting to kind of head that way where I started understanding what was going on.
Mhm.
As a little kid, you don't know what's going on, right? But it definitely helped shape my perspective on trusting God and also trusting him in these places where you don't have control over what's next, right?
Yeah. No, I love that intentionality that they had in the conversations with you. And I just think about my own family and some different scenarios. And, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. I have a son who's 7, and he is watching and he is paying attention and he is listening. You know this because he'll say things later that it's like, okay, my wife and I talked about that at a dinner. We own a business together, so we talk about business a lot over the dinner table. Sometimes in very positive ways, sometimes in ways that we could see improvement and
Yeah.
opportunities, right?
Yeah.
But he's always listening and observing, and then later he'll bring it back up. And it just is a reminder, hearing this from your story too, for parents, for myself, for those that maybe don't have that as part of their story, that intentionality to do that with with your kids of just being careful what you say, right? I mean, you hear it, but it's true. Even when you're young, you're 7, getting into middle school, high school, that those things are going to change and impact their futures. They're watching, they're listening, and they're paying really close attention. And there's things that we can do intentionally as parents to help support them in that growth.
Yeah. I don't know what your 7-year-old looks like, but I've got a 5-year-old daughter, and I can see her lock in, right? And like, she's listening when mom and dad are talking about work, right? And that is sometimes terrifying, because sometimes you're just trying to unload on maybe a bad day with your spouse. Like, man, this was tough, but you want to be thoughtful about that, especially in front of your kids. 6. I can't believe I just called her 5. She's 6. But yeah, our younger daughter, she's not there yet, but it doesn't take much for a kid that's astute and observant to understand how parents view what they're doing day in, day out. Even describing work to a kid is hard sometimes. Like, our students are at a great school and a wraparound daycare program, but like, the concept of work is a weird one when you're trying to explain it to a 6-year-old on, like, where do mom and dad go every day? What does that look like, right? And I remember having those same questions when I was a kid, right? So how do you show that and show that it matters, and but also in balance? Like, we care deeply about our kids, and we want them to grow up and want to spend time with them, and intentionality around them. But it is a hard balance if you're trying to be successful in your career. So
100%. So you mentioned that you've got a couple older sisters, and they played sports. What were they into? Were they into golf as well, or was it just kind of everything? You guys were a sports family in general.
Sports family. They did not play golf, but sports and music in our house. So a lot of volleyball, basketball. They dabbled a little bit in other sports, but those were the main ones that they really participated in. And so I was in the stands a lot for those games, and my dad was coaching a lot of those games for them and for me later. And so I think my parents, certainly my dad, saw the value of what sport can teach to young people. And that certainly has shaped who I am and what I'm doing from a career perspective as well, because I just kind of took for granted it was normal that you were always in a sport of some kind. I wasn't like specializing. I didn't do like, the club fill in the blank sport or playing 15 tournaments every summer for golf, but we did everything. Like, we tried every sport. We were playing something in every season. And now, reflecting on it as a parent, like, it was a huge time sacrifice to be able to do that.
How'd you know where my next question was going to go? You see my eyes, and there's kind of like, oh
man, like, but as a kid, you're just like, hey, this what it is. And for me, learning that from my wife, Cindy, she didn't have that growing up. She didn't play sports. They weren't a sports family. And so to think about how much time, energy, and effort we spent around sport, which can lead down maybe a dangerous path and putting too much stock in that. But what a great teaching skill just to learn through sport. And you can learn so much through different ones. Golf is uniquely individual. I love basketball just as much as I love golf. That's so much team, and the sum being better than the parts. And I just learned a lot through both of those experiences. So,
no, it's awesome to hear. We started this conversation talking a little bit about your story today and what you're up to today, and then we just got into the beginning of your story and already talking about how you observed your father doing some of these things of teaching these skills that now you're teaching to other kids. And we'll get into more of it, but it's almost like some of those seeds early on are getting planted for you, and observations of the impacts that your father had on those teams and those kids at that time.
Yeah, for sure.
So through that, did you also potentially observe, you mentioned a slippery slope. Did you also potentially observe the opposite, where, kids got involved in sports and it turned into being a negative for them in some way, or not from your observations?
That's a great question. I certainly have seen it become a negative, and I think it really comes down to context as far as like being a believer. I think as a kid, I maybe put too much value and stock and emphasis in being successful in sport, to the point of kind of it being an idol in comparison to my faith and my walk, right? So I think that's the dance as somebody that really cares meaningfully about their faith, is like, I want my kids to learn through sport, but the success or the focal point that we put on sport, was it an unhealthy balance? Like, my wife sometimes still jokes with me, like, the time I see you most emotional is when you're watching sports. I'm like, you're you're right. Like I'm not really proud of that, but
Mhm.
the emphasis that we put on, I think, depending on the type of kid, can certainly impact it in a way where it's like, all right, am I putting this over the thing that I care most about or should care most about? So I think that's where the slope is. As from a parent perspective, yeah, I'm kind of terrified of where sport is heading for youth, just around this specialization at an early age and traveling across state lines every weekend to go to this or that. But it's a really hard dance when your kid is into something in a meaningful way. There's often not a middle ground. It's like either you can just kind of play in your backyard and it's not super competitive or challenging, or you have to invest crazy amounts of time and money for your kid to kind of lean in. And I'm just so grateful that somehow my parents were able to navigate what I felt like was kind of in the middle. But I think that middle is smaller and smaller each and every year
Mm.
because of kind of the monetization of youth sport. So yeah, I think it certainly can be a slippery slope for families and for kids.
Mm. No, and I'm just getting my toes dipped into some of this. Like I said, my son is 7, right? So he's just getting into, he's played a little bit of baseball, starting to get into basketball. It's like, okay, do we do, one thing at a time? Do we do one one thing a season? Do we just do everything that he's interested in and kind of go from there? So we're starting to, understand that a little bit more. And
Yeah.
for me, my parents set it up in a way where I was homeschooled, so it was a good opportunity for me to get involved with and more engaged with the community. So we always had like one sport going on at a
Yeah.
time, right? And there were homeschool groups, so they were all kind of in the area. So we didn't do too much traveling, but I definitely experienced also kind of the community, the team building aspects of sports for me growing up as well. Now, so you're into sports, you're traveling with your family a little bit as your sisters are doing this as well. Now you're getting into middle school, high school. What are some of your interests at that stage in life? Are you into school? Are you just saying, nope, I just want to, play basketball or whatever you're doing at that phase?
So again, I'm a rule follower, always have been, for better and worse. And so I was a good academic student, like not valedictorian or anything, but top 10 or whatever in my class. It was a small class to be fair. But so I think I've always had an ability to be able to juggle all of those things. I would consider myself kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. And my high school and middle school would reflect that. Like I played a bunch of different sports. I was a team player in that, and I was like engaged, but I was never our top player in anything, I guess, other than golf. And I was a good student. So I think again, in reflecting, never would have known that at the time. The world now and really always is like really valued specialization. Like I'm really good at this specific skill, whether it be a sport or just like a career, right? Um, I'm really fortunate that I'm in a role that has allowed me to like I need to be adequate and solid in a bunch of different areas, but I'm not an expert in any of them,
Mm.
right? And I think God's kind of placed me in a role that has allowed me to kind of lean into the fact that that's my skill set, not that I'm really good at accounting or fundraising or the other things that my job or coaching, but I'm maybe average or above average at a lot of different things, and that God gives each of us with different talents and skills. And I think I saw that early in middle school and high school for me. So,
And middle school and high school, was your father coaching you as well, or did you have other coaches that poured into you or mentors at that stage?
yeah, so my dad coached me predominantly through middle school and then just into the beginning of high school before he that's kind of when he wrapped up. And I would say from a coach perspective, a couple high school coaches, golf coaches were pretty impactful for me, that leaned into me and maybe saw something in me that I didn't see in myself as far as talent and ability. As somebody that like has a strong people pleasing tendency, that mattered a lot to me to have a coach affirm and say like, I see something in you that maybe you don't see quite yet, was really meaningful to me. I had similar things in my basketball career, kind of like a tough, hard-nosed coach that I didn't perform very well under, and then a more coach that was a more affirming and like, hey, like you've got this, you can do this. And I always performed better under that kind of coach. In hindsight, I didn't really realize it at the time. And then the coach that I would say has had the most impact on me was my collegiate golf coach, who I'm still really close with, Dr. Brian Bolt, who's the dean of students at Calvin. I just learned a lot about kind of the balance that we're talking about how to raise a family, have a a challenging but fulfilling career, and around sport. And so he taught me a lot about just how to balance, and not by him telling me how to balance, but just observation again. So I would say, yeah, coaches definitely impacted me in a meaningful way. And I think the unique thing, in my opinion, about coaches is you can have a phenomenal teacher when you're in middle school and high school, but you're probably not going to get them for more than 1 or 2 years. If you've got a good coach, you often are with them for 3 or 4 years, and they help you grow and develop for a longer period of time. Back to what I do now, I think that's like kind of our special sauce at First Tee is we start working with kids at age 7 all the way through the end of high school. Like, you really get to be part of that transformative adult influence in their life about who are you, where are you going, what can you accomplish over this long period of time. It's not just lightning bolt of a great teacher for a year and then they're gone, right? And so that's why I think coaches can be so impactful in people's lives and where they're headed.
You mentioned that it wasn't necessarily something that the coach said to you, which probably was pouring certain things into you with his words, but it was kind of his actions and, the way that he was treating his time and things like that as well. So it just goes beyond, kind of back to the whole kids observing what you're doing, even not what you're saying at home, but you're doing that with coaches and students and athletes as well.
Yeah.
So getting into college, you mentioned you moved from Wisconsin. I'm not super familiar with Wisconsin. I've taken the kids to the Dells a couple times. I don't know how far that is from.
It's a ways away, but that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
same state.
Yeah.
And we'll take the Lake Express
Okay.
back and forth.
Yeah.
I've been there a couple times. But you made the trip and came to Grand Rapids and Calvin. What drew, like golf? It sounds like drew you to Calvin. But had you been familiar with the area prior to that, or was it kind of just the school and the golf team?
Yeah. There wasn't a lot of decision making going on in the college side. I certainly had choice, but the standard operating path for our family was to go to Calvin. So both of my older sisters went. We grew up in the Christian Reformed Church, so there's this connectivity to Calvin, and my mom's whole side of the family ended up going to Calvin. And so as somebody coming out of high school that didn't have a very specific, like, I want to be fill in the blank, getting a good liberal arts education at a school that was a known quantity in a place that I'd visited plenty of times to visit my sisters, and then potentially, hey, kind of gravy if I make the golf team, is essentially the concept. And so I was a business major at Calvin, pretty much defaulted there because I had no idea what I was going to do, to be perfectly honest. And I learned a lot at Calvin, but I would say that was part of kind of like the normal progression and path for my family and how we were raised. Again, parents didn't force it on me, but for me, it was like, this seems logical. Let's do that, I guess. But I learned so much about kind of making faith my own, and how I think when you grow up in a small town like I did, and went to a small Christian school, life was pretty black and white for me as far as this is right, this is wrong, these people are right, these people are wrong. And I think Calvin just gave me a better perspective around how much your upbringing and background influence who you are, and how much I just took for granted on how good I had it. Like, having really solid parents that cared deeply about me in a school with teachers that cared about me, and opportunities to play sports. And I think at Calvin, I got convicted through a couple internships that, like, whoa, what I had is not what everybody has. And that helped shape me getting into what I do now, really. I didn't have that coming in. So I give Calvin and what I learned at Calvin a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I want to unpack that a little bit more, but first a little story from me and Calvin and how that relates. So you mentioned your background's a little bit more of a rule follower. You did well in school, and then, kind of followed the family trend of going to Calvin. Kind of mine was the opposite, maybe not as much of a rule follower, and didn't do quite as well in school. And a lot of my friends were going to Calvin because I grew up in the area, Christian Reformed, and they all, said, hey, let's go to Calvin. I did a couple visits of Calvin, and did the opposite, went to Grand Valley where none of my friends were going, and kind of like, okay, I'm going to do something completely different. But I kind of relating to a similar story of what you said, how much the importance of your family and your way that you're raised going into school. Like, even for me going into Grand Valley versus Calvin, similar type story of like, hey, tend to attract certain types of people because of your background and what you're interested in, and where you tend to find yourself because of what you were taught.
Yeah.
And so you found ways to find certain groups of friends that help shape your
Yeah.
future. But then also I observed the opposite being true, of getting into and finding other groups of individuals, and you can find them anywhere at Calvin, Grand
100%.
Valley, any of the schools, both the ones that are going to build you up. There's circles of influence that are going to build you up, and those that are going to have you on a path that's not going to lead towards success in your future. So, anyway, just wanted to plug that in a little bit of how there's some connections there. And I'm curious on your overall, it sounds like a very positive experience at university and at school. But there probably were also some scenarios where you're like, okay, this was a little bit different than I expected, or this was something that I, got into school, and now my eyes were open to something that maybe I didn't know of prior to, and that I had to struggle with a little bit or wrestle with.
Yeah, and I think some of my classes helped me just think through that, whether it be I had a religion class where I would say our professor was borderline universalist, and like it was actually good for my type of brain, where I was like, why do I think what I think? Because that's not what I think. And make you kind of dig into the faith that I kind of just took for granted because it's been taught to me all my life, to like, okay, when you start hearing different perspectives for the first time, what are my convictions on this? And so I don't think that was probably something Calvin would have loved to have heard, but that was my experience. And I think really my like perspective shifting happened through internships that I got like kind of during and after Calvin. So I interned at Mel Trotter Ministries my senior year. Doing kind of marketing. They had a golf outing, so they plugged me into that. And then really more impactful even than that was a small ministry on the west side called the Other Way Ministries. And I led a group of teenagers from the west side, kind of Grand Rapids public school students, and we like mowed area lawns. So I was like the supervisor, but you're kind of giving these teenagers and late middle schoolers their first opportunity to learn through a job. And that's really when my eyes were opened to the challenges that the kids that I was working with were facing, that I just absolutely took for granted, whether it be consistency at the home, trusting a bank, like just all kinds of skills that I learned through either observation or just direct instruction from my parents that I'm like, that they didn't have. And it broke my heart. And I think God uses these different times and places to like, this thing matters to me, right? And you can't care about all the things that God cares about and do all of those things well. But for me, like learning that kids don't have these opportunities that I just took for granted, like it wrecked me, honestly. And it shifted how I perceive the world. And it got me really going toward the direction of First Tee and what we do with kids, being able to use something I love to teach students like that, just a place to be loved and cared for, but also how you build up skill sets and like, hey, there are other worlds available to you. There are other opportunities available to you than what you have seen in your immediate family in this 3-block radius that you've lived in. And it's been a ton of fun doing it.
So I love your story so far, and specifically the fact that you've acknowledged, some of the scenarios where you've been really blessed, with your parents pouring into you, the different coaches that you've had, they've had a positive influence into your life, the school that you got into, the different sports you've had the opportunity to play, and then you connected that with, hey, there's some scenarios where the backgrounds aren't the same as mine, and that's caused, some hurt and some conflict, and some scenarios where maybe I have an opportunity that I can help others get into that same opportunity. So I like that as part of your story. So thank you so much for sharing that and how it's led into your passion, obviously your passion for what you're doing today. Thinking about back to Kelvin and how you mentioned your background shapes so much of, your experience there. If there was someone that found themselves at a school like Calvin or whatever Christian university, how can they be intentional about, guess what I'm trying to say is if they don't have the, understanding going into school like the way that you did about what you believed and able to
Mm.
challenge some of those things, how can they go into it with intentionality of how to understand that for them, maybe who to seek out, how to seek out the right people when you get into your freshman year of school, how to seek out the right professors, the right mentors, how to know who I should be listening to and who I should not be listening to. This is a massive question. But like you understand what I'm trying to get at is really like for those that are getting into college, they have this is just such an inflection point for them
Yeah.
that who you're around, the people that the ideas that you absorb are going to change your first job, first career, but your families in the future and your kids in
Mm.
the future. It's just a big point. I know in my life there are a couple of different things, even just getting involved with like campus ministries or little
Mhm.
things like that, right? Just intentionally going that first week and connecting with those first people that first time, that were helpful for me. But what are some maybe suggestions or ideas that you have for those that are getting into school?
And I don't know if I've got a ton of wisdom on that, Stephen. Like,
Mm.
I think the main thing that I would push in is trying to find a community that stretches you. It makes you a little uncomfortable, but hopefully in a good way, not in like in a negative way. So, you know, my wife Cindy grew up in a completely different experience in the city of Chicago and came to Calvin and had a wildly different perspective coming into Calvin because of where she was born and raised and her kind of family story. Um, but we both ended up at a church that we really cared about separately. Like we didn't know each other at Calvin. We actually were the same grade at Calvin and never actually met until after school. Like Calvin's not that big. It was weird. But
Yeah,
we traveled in
probably did at some point, but
yeah, we traveled in wildly different circles,
Huh.
and had different, you know, different passions, I guess I would say. But for me, probably one of the most impactful things was, and this is part of me being a rule follower, but I really deeply wanted to find a church that I cared about in Grand Rapids. And I did like the normal, I guess normal here, maybe not normal elsewhere, but the normal, like I'm going to check out a bunch of churches my freshman year and try to find one that I'm going to stick at. And, I ended up landing at the church that I'm still at 17 years ago as a sophomore at Calvin. And it, I would say, is a lot more charismatic than the church that I grew up in, a lot more spirit led than the church that I grew up in kind of like a small traditional Christian Reformed church, going to a Bible church. It's Crossroads Bible here in town. But that helped shape a lot of who I was and kind of made my faith my own in a different way, that it wasn't just intellectual, but it was like in the heart too. Like, how do we connect the head and the heart as believers? And I guess my only suggestion to folks that are heading into a university, because to your point, you can find whatever you're looking for at any school that you go to. Like Calvin's got no corner on that, nor does anyone else. You can always find a negative or a positive influence, but how do you find places that are going to actually stretch you? Because you know when it's a good stretch versus like, oh, this is going down the wrong path. At least I do. I think most people do. But how do you stretch yourself a little bit to think a little differently than maybe the way that you were raised? My wife and I joke all the time, like, if we would have met and actually exchanged ideas as freshmen in college, it wouldn't have gone very well. And so, but by the time we met, I think our experience both in school and in church and all the people around us, it opened us up to the fact that, again, it's not this black and white. This is the only way. How could you think otherwise? And God's got a sense of humor on stuff like that. And now we've been married for 11 years, right? So, yeah, I just stretch yourself in a positive way as much as you can. Find people that you think are gonna push you in some way meaningful. But easier said than done sometimes.
No, thanks for sharing that. And you mentioned that you've been at Crossroads for 17 years. You
Yeah.
kind of started while you were at Calvin. And through that time, you were in business school. So you were studying, yes, you had religion classes as part of Calvin, but also you had accounting classes and things like that. And then you were doing your internships, mentoring those that were doing lawn care and things like that and doing the golf outings and all of that. What was your ideas for a career at that point? Were you thinking, hey, I'm going to professionally play golf? What?
No.
Sorry.
Oh, not that good. No, I
Okay.
appreciate it though. Honestly, I had no idea, and it was terrifying. So God used that for me. But really my senior year, I had those internships. So I'm kind of winding down my college career, not sure what we're going to do next. And you have these very you talk about inflection points or kind of decision times that about, I'd say the 4-month window post-graduation, I graduated in the heart of the recession in 2010, was really meaningful. And in hindsight, you can see how God used that kind of 4 or 5 month period, because in my world, like I should have had a job ready to go when I was graduated. I lived with 4 engineers. They all had a job ready to go. They locked in like 6 months before. I had no idea what I was going to do. But through a series of conversations with people that I really cared about, and I had one job offer as well. I can see in hindsight how God kind of got me to where we're at now. So kind of series of conversations, like just quick hot spotlights. A mutual friend of mine connected me to the Grand Valley AD at the time, and we ended up playing a round of golf together at a golf outing. Never met the man before. He heard about kind of my passion, doing some of the nonprofit work that I'd done, passion for golf. He's like, you should look into First Tee. Never had heard of it at that point. Got a job offer about 3 months after graduation. Just like, it was a logistics job. It wasn't anything I was super passionate about, but a bunch of good people at the firm, and was just kind of pinging my parents, my coach at Calvin. Here's what I'm thinking about. I think I'm going to take this job. And I can still remember his conversations, and another close friend of mine just really like, is this what you want to do? I was like, no, but I kind of need a job, coach. He's like, okay, like I get it. I understand. But again, he saw something in me or where I should go that I didn't see in myself. Like, I just got to get a job. I'm out of school. I got to get a paycheck. And so that conversation, along with a couple others with my parents, shifted me to saying no to that job offer and moving to Tennessee with a buddy of mine for a few months. And I was trying to force my way into getting a job at a First Tee chapter in Tennessee. So First Tee is a national nonprofit, international actually, that has different chapters all over the place. And so we had made a pact that we were going to move south when we were in college. So I was like, okay, I should follow through on that pact. He had gotten a job as a PE teacher down there. And I tried to force my way into a job at the First Tee, all because of this kind of conversation that was set up kind of by chance or providence in my mind with the AD that put me on the First Tee. And I said, that sounds like a pretty good combination of what I care about. And so while I volunteered at that chapter down there for 4 months, I found out they were trying to start one here in Grand Rapids. And so I made my pitch to the golf course owner that had the letter of intent to start a chapter here. And he said, I got my guy, sorry. I'm like, okay, well, let me know how I can help, right? And he called me back about a month or two later while I was down in Tennessee. He said, my guy bailed. If you want to try to get it off the ground, it's yours. So no paycheck coming with that, right? Trying to figure out, do I want to start a nonprofit with no experience, knowledge, understanding, very limited context because I'm from Wisconsin, some, but limited. And then from there, that was February of 2011. I came back to Grand Rapids to try to start the First Tee. And you just see it in hindsight, the people that God kind of placed in my path, that over the next 4 or 5 months of me trying to fundraise and failing miserably, and then getting a grant that we had no business getting, but because the right context and the right places vouched and vetted for me in a way that they probably shouldn't have as a 22-year-old, that's what got us started. So we got enough money raised or committed within like 6 months of when we needed to get started. And so I worked for First Tee for 6 months without a paycheck. And then we had a kind of cobbled together board of directors and me trying to figure out how we're going to do this. So that's how we started. But man, God's provision in that, it just like, you could see it over and over again in hindsight. In the midst of it, you're like, I don't think this is going to work.
Yeah.
I give, again, to my parents' credit, a ton of credit for them. They loaned me some money to like pay the bills for a few months because I was like, I'm out of cash. I don't have anything left. And they're like, give this a shot. Like, we think this is something that God's led you to. Let's see what happens. Like, we'll float you for 4 or 5 months. Again, like, so blessed how many people get that opportunity, right? When you're graduating from college, your parents are like, all right, we'll float you some money. But again, those conversations and those people supporting me and God's kind of wisdom and understanding got us off the ground when we were started and put the right people in the right place. Cause I was 22. I didn't know anything, a board chair that knew like Robert's Rules of Orders and articles of incorporation and bylaws, and a treasurer that understand how to do nonprofit books and all this stuff that like I had no chance of without. So just awesome place to start for me.
6 months is a long time.
It was a long time.
Yeah.
It felt longer.
Yeah. You mentioned some of the different pieces that fell into place, that supported and obviously led towards where you're at today, but it still is a long time, and it still probably was a struggle and a journey for you, like not knowing that it was going to be 6 months. I know a lot of times we go through valleys, it's even bringing this to kind of business owners that are, going through really good times. So it's like, kind of like, oh, I had a good year. Oh, I had a bad year. Whatever that definition is for you. But then it comes back to like, oh, I had a good month. Oh, I had a bad month. Oh, I had a good week. I had a bad week. Now it's like, okay, last hour was a good hour. Now it's, a bad hour, and it kind of fluctuates a little bit. But how do you decrease those valleys a little bit? But as you're going through those valleys, you don't know when you're going to be on the other side with anything, whether it's health related, struggles with relationships or different things. Like you don't know what the end is.
Right.
But so it was 6 months long. Each day you had to kind of wake up and attack it. Like what kept you going?
Oh man, I felt really convicted that this could make a big impact, and I couldn't think of a position that I would be more passionate about. Like I really, like I said, my heart broke for the kids that I worked at that nonprofit. I wanted to lean into that, but here I've got this kind of business background and like passion for golf. Like you couldn't really write a better job description. So I think partly out of fear of what would happen if this didn't work. Like I wanted to so badly make this happen. And that doesn't always get you to the finish line, don't get me wrong. But I think it wasn't that hard for me to grind because I felt like, man, if this can happen, this would be like a dream job and I get to start with it. Like I don't have to till the soil for 15 years doing something that I don't like to do to be able to get the opportunity. Like I could maybe do it right away. And that goes back to my parents and kind of that, like do something that you feel called to, a vocation, something that is meaningful and impactful. Like those kinds of things were running through my head, and it was a valley. Like, I raised I think I raised $3,500 over the span of those 6 months before we got the seed money to start from Amway in town. And that's what really got us off the ground. So I was not successful in what I was trying to do, but I so badly wanted it. And I felt too that I had to put in the effort because of some of the people that had kind of poured into me, whether it be my parents floating me some money or my coach saying, is that really what you want to do? Like random kind of logistics job? Or like my teammate I actually just played with yesterday saying like, you got to give this a shot, man. If you could do it, how fun would this be? Right. And like those kind of conversations are kind of playing in your head when you're waking up and just trying to grind, and really you're making I was pretty much cold calling, trying to get people to like, I heard you like golf and you're influential in town. You want to chat and like see if we can get this thing off the ground. So yeah, it was hard, but I felt pretty convicted it was the right place to be.
Do you think it's that conviction and then that having to go through that valley and your drive to get through that valley that led towards some of those conversations with the Amway group and the seed money that you needed that helped that to take place? Or was it kind of other pieces that came together and it just kind of happened? Like, what was that end of the 6 months like for you?
One of the things I had to learn really early is nobody had an expectation of me for anything. I was 22. I didn't know anything. So almost the posture of coming into the conversations of being open about that and saying like, I care deeply about this. I really want to be successful, but help me understand how you do things, how this works. How could we get this done? And taking that posture of humility of like, I am not the expert in the room, and I know I'm not the expert in the room. I think that ingratiated me to people that could really move the needle for me. Like, I kind of want to help this kid, like, because that's what I was. I was a kid. And ultimately, those folks really got us over the finish line. They went to bat because they were in positions of influence and authority that I certainly was not, saying, like, we should get behind this kid. I see something in him, or what the first tee is about, that I really feel like we should support. And there's two kind of executives at Amway that really helped us get that money that I had no business getting, being a 22-year-old kid with no previous job experience. But they said, in the room that mattered, we should get behind this and do this, because I think it's going to make a big impact in the community. So that posture of humility, of like, yeah, you don't have to be the expert. People kind of see through it when you're not the expert and you're pretending to be the expert. One of my favorite parts of the role now is I get to chat all the time with people that are experts in their field and learn from them. And they're willing to give their advice and counsel for free because they want to see the organization succeed, right? So I don't know that much about insurance, but I can call half a dozen people that could tell me a lot about it, or accounting, or even fundraising, right? So how do you take that posture of humility and understand I can learn a lot from this person if I just kind of come up with kind of open hands and saying, I want to learn from you? Ultimately, you still got to get the work done. But man, you can learn a lot, and those people want to help then, right? They're part of the team. They're a partner now in the organization. They're not just somebody that you're asking something from, right?
I love it. And, you hear in the industries that we're in, whatever, you hear a lot as you're getting into your first positions, sometimes like fake it till you make it, right? Just go in with confidence, pretend like you know what you're talking about, and go for it. Maybe those are sales related conversations that people are saying that, but also like there is something to be said. So when I started my first business, Perception Engineering, I started that in 2013. I didn't know what I was doing when it came to running a business at all either. And I always joke around like, maybe if I did know, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But it's like one of the things that like I was naive to this scenario, and I just like, this isn't gonna be that hard. Let's just go do it. Like, it was very difficult. But that not knowing is what kept me going, I guess, for the first couple of years, right? It was like, oh, this is just going to happen anytime. It's not going to be that hard. Just keep going, keep going. But now it's a little bit different. Like, it's not the naiveness to how hard it is, but it's the exact of what you described, of just genuine curiosity that I know what I don't know, but I don't know what other people know. So I'm like, what do they know? Because I just want to understand, because you have a different background than the next person, than myself. And I know what I know, but I don't know what you know. And like you said, with having some of those conversations that you're willing to have today, you pick up the phone and you're just curious, right? You just have those conversations, and that's what unlocks the knowledge that you don't have. You understand that you don't know what you don't know. And I was doing a little bit of math. Like I went to school for engineering. I did like maybe almost get my math minor, but that was a really long time ago. But so you mentioned you've been married for 14 years, right? 11 years.
Sorry.
You went, so you graduated in 2010.
Yep.
So this is before you met Cindy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The early years of First Tee, after we had gotten it off the ground, is when I met Cindy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So throughout that phase, you're 22 years old, single, kind of have, the ability to invest a lot of time and take some of those risks.
100%. Yes.
And then as things start progressing, can you tell me a little bit about those, first few years of First Tee, and then how you met your wife?
Yeah. So the first few years, I mean, I put in a lot of time. Like, I joke all the time that the phase of life that I'm in right now, I don't think I could have started what we started. I have a lot more knowledge, but the time that I was able to put in, it didn't feel like work, but I was probably consistently working 60 plus hours a week for years and years, because I was the only one that was doing the work. I had a board that was engaged and active, but when it came to coaching the classes directly with kids, or talking to the parents, or actually like, getting into our accounting system and entering checks and sending out invoices, it was me. It was like, I had to do all those things, just like you did when you started your business, right? But the work, it wasn't hard because I loved what we were doing and I really wanted it to succeed. So I put in a lot of time, but I had the time to give. I didn't have any strings attached, no relationship. And so as things steadied and we were about to add our second full-time staff, was roughly when I met Cindy. And again, kind of funny how God works. It was my first radio interview was when we were getting off the ground is when I met her. She was producing a radio station at the time, and someone had suggested that she invite me in. It was my first radio interview that I'd ever done, and that's how we met. And yeah, again, totally different experience, totally different background. We talk about before, like stretching you. Cindy stretches me still, but she stretched me right away, right? Just because her background and her experience was so wildly different from me growing up in a big city, going to Chicago public schools. She's a first generation immigrant. Her family immigrated from Romania. I've just learned so much from her and how she attacks and engages the world. And frankly, we hung out for months and months and months before I got the courage to ask her on a date, because she's spicy. Like, it's like, I don't know if I can handle this, like, to be perfectly honest. And she'd say the same thing. But again, the timing just feels so providential because of the timing of where we were at in our journeys individually. Felt like God placed us at that place where we ended up actually living like 2 blocks from each other for a while. That stuff doesn't happen by chance, in my opinion. And that's when we started dating and getting to know each other at a much deeper level. But I mean, we had our knockdown dragouts because we came from such different backgrounds that I'd say dating was challenging for us. Like, we both knew, like, we had some stuff that we needed to figure out while we were dating, but we both were really trying to figure that stuff out. And stretched me, stretched her. But I think it set us up for marriage in a way that a lot of people aren't set out for, because we had a lot of those really hard conversations while we were dating instead of in our first or second year of marriage, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And how long when did you get married? Was that, so that would be,
we got married when we were 26. We dated
okay.
for a couple of years. We had a short engagement, about 5-6 months. At that time, we were like, all right, let's go. Okay. But yeah, 2.5 years from first date to marriage. So,
and you're both in your separate careers, right? And how are things going for First Tee as you guys are getting your family and relationship off the ground?
Touch and go always, right? And we were a small nonprofit that was a year or 2 old. But if nothing else, I'm Dutch and frugal. So it wasn't like I wasn't sure if I was going to have a paycheck. Certainly had to continue to raise the money, but we were able to establish pretty quickly trust from either our parents, our volunteers. In the nonprofit world really attracts people that have huge hearts all the time, which is awesome. I wouldn't say it always attracts the people that are best at executing or like following through on commitments. And so for some reason, I don't know if somebody told me this or I just felt it. I just really felt like if I can just follow through on what I said I was going to do, I think we're going to be ahead of most nonprofits. Not because they don't care or not because other nonprofits aren't doing good work. It's just you're running a million different places all the time. If I can just follow through, I think we're going to get some traction. And we did. And we had the right people to help guide me in the things that I didn't know, like insurance and accounting and law and how to run a board meeting and all that stuff. So I would say I was still learning and growing a ton when we dated. She was in flux with her career as well, kind of bouncing from places to place. We joke all the time, like, I don't know how we were making it on what we were getting paid at the time, but again, God provides. Mm-hmm. We didn't know any better, right? Good thing, I think. So, yeah.
And then as you're progressing at First Tee, I don't know too much about the structure. You said different chapters. Did they provide a lot of the resources when it comes to curriculum or different things for you, or is that something that you had to create through that process as well?
Yeah, so the curriculum is established. So the best way I usually describe First Tee is think like Boys and Girls Come. It's a national organization with local chapters. So our own governing board, we get to dictate direction and how we want to do things. But the core of what we do is universal across all these different chapters. So we have built-in curriculum that we use that's life skills integrated with golf skills. And so every class that we teach with kids, they're learning a life skill, like, well, I'll just pick on goal setting because it's a really easy one. And then we're combining it with a golf skill like distance control when we're talking about putting or chipping. And so the class is always teaching those things seamlessly together with the goal and concept is as we wrap up class, we say, okay, now we understand why goals matter in golf. where do goals matter at home or school? We call that the bridge to life. So again, back to the youth development aspect, it's not a junior golf program. Like golf's the platform to teach these skills that we really want kids to know at home, at school. But we have a lot of autonomy at a chapter to kind of make business decisions. I'll say that there isn't a roadmap, like you have to run it this way. It's not a franchise, if you know what I mean. It's not like we're all selling Big Macs in the exact same way. And so that's where the business kind of side of me has been a lot of fun. I really enjoy kind of how do we do this in a way that has the biggest impact on kids, but is also sustainable and people are excited to engage in. And what that means fundraising, that means volunteering, that means participants, it means parents. And you have to have all these things kind of moving at roughly the same speed, because if they start getting out of alignment, it gets like really hairy really fast. No different than any other business, really, right? You can't scale too fast or you outstrip your coverage. Like all that stuff applies in a nonprofit world too.
So what does growth look like for First Tee over the years? And like, how do you, is it kind of like, okay, we're looking at sustainable kind of this size for the next 5 years, or, did you get to a certain size and kind of stay there? Or is it something where it's always like, the more we grow, the more kids we can impact, the more impact we can have on families we want to keep going. How does that look for First Tee and what you're doing?
Yeah. We never stop growing. Growth may look different year to year because there are so many ways to measure growth. So early on, it was just like the two metrics were number of kids served and who were they. So we feel very strongly we want to serve kids that don't otherwise have a chance. You just take who comes to you, it's probably going to be a more middle upper class group of kids. Mm-hmm. So a lot of partnerships with strategic partners like the Boys and Girls Club or Grand Rapids Public School. I'm a very focused on kind of year over year how things are going to look. Frankly, my gifting is not a 5 or 10-year plan. That's not how my brain operates. It's not really the gifts that God's given me. But we've been very successful year over year of saying this is what we want to accomplish in the upcoming year. It might be we're going to add a new community and provide the program in a new place. It might be we want to go deeper and add new layers of programming to offer our kids because we see gaps in services. It might be we need to add an additional fundraiser so we have the capacity to grow next year the program. And so that all comes through kind of some strategic planning with our board and with our staff. And really, we've operated that way for a long time, kind of year over year growth. Now, there are some things that need more time to bake out than a 1 year, but especially at the beginning, if we could show kind of consistent impact year over year that was growing, it was a compelling story for people to want to get involved. Now we're at a different point where we're kind of reaching our capacity in our current service area. And so our board is really focused, as well as me, like, how do we go deeper with the number of kids we already have? Like our normal kind of bread and butter is seeing kids once a week for 6 weeks. But what does it look like for us to go deeper with a group of kids and see them 2, 3, 4 days a week after school, be an after school provider program, kind of for the kids that are coming out of school and aren't ready to go home because their parents are working or what have you. And that takes more planning. And it's been a challenge and a struggle, but I think it's really meaningful for us. So where we've had success is our business structure as well as our team. Our team is fantastic. The full-time staff that we have really grown in 4 communities. So our hub is Grand Rapids, but we serve Muskegon, Oceana, and Newaygo counties north. Holland and Allegan counties is a separate service area, and then down in Kalamazoo. So we really have 4 main communities that we're serving, and each of them have like representatives in their community. So Muskegon, Holland, and Kalamazoo all have 2 full-time staff, their own advisory boards for their community. And so building kind of the structure to make this sustainable is really important. And we've certainly made mistakes along the way, but I think it's why we've had the longevity and the kind of consistency that we've had to providing impact. And there haven't been a lot of these for us. It's been this kind of slow growth that's probably not particularly sexy from the outside, but it's very trustworthy and reliable for a parent. They know what they're going to get next year, and they know the coach isn't going to probably change, or a donor that knows like this is meaningful impact and it's not going to move and they're not going to shift direction next year, or a volunteer, they know what the opportunities are. And I think that matters as a young organization, that people can just trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. Right.
100%. Yeah. What age range do you typically work with kids? And then can you give some stats on the business today? You mentioned some of the different areas that you serve, but kind of the family size, the team size, and then a little bit of what your role is today.
Yeah. We work with kids as young as 7 all the way through the end of high school.
Wow.
We have most kids are between the ages of 7 and 12, kind of before that age of sport specialization. When we get to that age of sport specialization, our focus changes a little bit. Like we lean in deeper with a smaller group of kids. But as far as like kind of size and structure, I said 4 communities. We operate a $1.3 million annual budget right now. We have 13 full-time staff, 80 part-time lead coaches, some of which are our own junior coaches. So we hire back our own teenagers to help at class and try to build them up to be leaders and lead class. And then about 2,300 annual donors through a variety of different events and platforms that we do. And so that's kind of the structure as it is now. It's come a long way since like me kind of just grinding that one golf course in Grand Rapids. But again, God's been faithful. And I think West Michigan's a uniquely philanthropic community and pretty golf focused, which is great for us. And I just give a lot of credit to the community at large, especially the golf courses. They've been incredible hosts. Most of the golf courses that provide us access to do our classes do it completely free of charge or for like a negligible amount. And there's no way that this functions at all unless we have those partners. And if I don't know if you know this, but golf is booming. Like since COVID has happened, more and more people have gotten into the game. These golf courses don't need us to drive traffic right now. They've got plenty of traffic. So their willingness to continue to host us for not a lot of payout shows kind of the heart that this community has as a whole. So.
No, thanks for sharing that. And you mentioned going deeper with some of these families. So maybe this is an insight into your answer for this next question, is around what you're most excited about, over the next 3 to 5 years, whether it's First Tee, personally, whatever you want to describe that. But as you're looking at how far the organization has come, and you have come from those first 6 months of kind of just like, I don't know what I'm doing,
Yep.
But I'll figure this out. Yeah, I've got the right people in my corner, to what you're most excited about over the next 3 to 5 years. Kind of, can you unpack that a little bit for us?
The main thing for us, we've gotten really good at these, I'll call it our meat and potatoes program, like this 6-class session environment and format. We're good at it. It's impactful, but we really want to lean into kind of how do we have more kids when they're graduating high school say, what influenced you, they get podcast interviews some point, like First Tee is part of that conversation, right? And to us, it's really about having a flagship home. So the next 3 to 5 years, really our goal and objective is, can we have a place and a space that is our own for our kids in a strategic location where we can run the programs that they need in that place and that time when they need it. Because as I mentioned, we're guests everywhere. And that means we can't always dictate the schedule and when we can have host classes or host kids. And that means like we can't go as deep as far as providing day after day programming or, strategically identifying a group of kids from one school and saying, we're going to lean in on this group and really try to like move the needle in their life as far as where they're headed, how they view life. Maybe it's a golf career. Maybe it's what they can learn through golf. And so the next 3 to 5 years is really around finding places that are kind of like our flagship First Tee home. We'll always do classes at all these golf courses, but a central location in these communities that like where First Tee lives and that you can go there and that we can do really intentional programming year round in that space. And we currently cannot do that. We've been trying to get there for a long time. This is where patience and perseverance are definitely needed. But you need strategic partnership to do that, because we're not in the business of owning and operating a golf course. That's a different thing. We're youth development, but we need a golf course to want to partner and do this kind of work at a deeper level. And it's kind of a big ask. So, yeah.
I love that when I asked, what is some of the things that you're most excited about the next 3 to 5 years, you went straight towards the impact that this program can have on kids and other people. right? You didn't go straight towards like, hey, this is something that, I could have myself more successful
Oh.
for me, but you jump straight to the kids. And I think that that's exciting to hear. And it kind of brings about probably people watching this interested in helping you achieve
Mm.
that vision over the next 3 to 5 years, achieve what you're looking for. And you mentioned that you've got volunteers, donors, parents that need to get involved, all different types of kids that need to come into this space. If someone's, watching or listening, how can they get in touch with you or get involved with the organization?
Our website's probably the easiest place to go. First T West Michigan. You're going to find the staff member that is the easiest to connect to. And we're going to, every time we try to have a face-to-face conversation, because there's so many ways that you can engage. And I'm a really strong proponent of like, let's find the seat or the opportunity that you're most excited about, not just what our biggest need is. I'm happy to share what our biggest need is. And that might change depending on the month that you chat with me, right? But I kind of grew up in a, a place where I'll say, volunteering was a little guilt driven.
Mm.
I don't think it was super healthy. And so I really want people when they engage, whether they're a donor or a partner or a volunteer, to do it in a way that they feel like fulfilled and that's impactful, because ultimately it's not their full-time job. Like I'm fortunate that it is my full-time job, but I'm relying on a lot of people that are just doing it out of the additional limited time that they have. So let's find a seat that makes sense for you. So it might be, hey, I want to work directly with kids. Okay, let's look at the different ways that you can do that, whether it's coaching at a 6-class session or taking kids out to play golf or being an instructor if you're a PGA professional. Or, hey, I'm actually more interested in the business side of things. How do I make the organization thrive? Okay, we've got committees and we've got advisory councils and board positions that people can engage in and kind of share and lend their expertise and get involved. And then obviously there's the donor side, right? People are always trying to find something that they feel convicted on and that they trust that their money is going to make a meaningful impact in the community. And so, ultimately at this point, that's a lot of my job is fund development. And that's the way we can grow. We're not going to be able to have bigger impact unless we have more financial support to do so, because last year we gave away almost 60% of our programs completely free of charge to the families that come from low income backgrounds. We don't want cost to be the barrier for our families, but that means we need support from the community to make that work. And so, yeah, come to our website. You'll see our kind of group of 13 staff, wherever you're at in Muskegon, Holland, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids. Connect with someone, and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible and have that kind of face meeting to kind of see what is the best fit. And maybe we won't get it right the first time. Maybe we'll take a couple different opportunities to kind of figure out this is the spot for me. But
Awesome. Love it. And we'll put the link to your website in the description of the details here as well.
that.
And then just last questions as we round things up. We're going to get into what your definition of success is here in a little bit. But before that, rewinding a little bit, your childhood, you're in middle school, high school, you have the opportunity to talk to yourself at that age. There's things that are going through your mind. You're playing sports, you're watching your dad, you're getting poured into from your family, but you have the opportunity to give yourself a little piece of advice, encouragement, or a warning, maybe something to be careful of. Maybe it's don't take that. Don't take that radio interview, but that was a positive. Make sure you say yes, whatever. If you go back, what is something that you would, piece of advice that you'd give yourself at that age?
I think I'd lean on two things that I've learned the hard way. You're not in control. Trust in God's timing. Someone that's wired like I am, I so very much want to take the reins of everything and make sure and control the direction of where it's going. Sometimes that's a blessing in work, right? Because it's like you have some vision and direction. But ultimately, life's going to whack you upside the head here and there, and you can't anticipate it, and you don't know what's coming. As a middle schooler and high schooler, I felt like I knew everything and that I was in control. And God's got a plan. You're part of it. Trust it. Because if you try to get a stranglehold on your life, it's not going to go well for you. And And I've learned that in a bunch of different places. So that I guess that's what I would say, because I would say I was borderline arrogant in that age group, that I had kind of life figured out. I think a lot of middle schooler and high schoolers think that, but life's going to hit you pretty hard at some point in time, and you're going to question some things. That's what I'd lean in on. It's one thing that I keep coming back to all the time. So
I know that you were saying that to yourself when you were younger, but I was locked into what you were saying. I was like, maybe it's something that I needed to hear today myself, because as I'm even going through running a business, there's different things where I need to understand and just let go of control too. Feel like I can control everything. I mean, I started the business from nothing. Like, used to do this. I used to do the accounting. Like you said, used to do all these different things.
Yeah.
My wife's listening to this. She's like, "You never did the accounting. You just said you did. I always did the accounting." So I should correct
Don't take
that.
credit.
No. Yep. But wore a lot of the different hats, right? And now starting to hand some of those hats off. And man, it is tough. So yeah, I appreciate that and what you said there as well. And now thinking through your definition of success and how that's changed for you over the years, and just camping on that for a little bit as we close our time out together. What is your definition of success today?
Yeah. And I've been thinking about this for a little while, because you prepped me, but ultimately, I think the way you framed the question to me earlier was around success and fulfillment. And I think those things have to be intertwined, because the definition of success for me is going to be where I feel like I'm being fulfilled in the work that I'm doing. And it may not look exactly like I think it's going to look, but fulfillment in all the different things that I'm trying to do, like being a good dad, being a good husband, being a leader at the church, being a good business leader. If I try to define success too granularly, I think I'm going to start chasing after something that I don't want to chase after, if that makes sense. So if I'm getting fulfillment and conviction on where I'm supposed to be spending my time and how I can be better in these areas from God, that's what I'm looking for. Stephen, my biggest weakness, we talked about control, but it's like this performance-based mentality. I don't think that's super biblically based, and that's one of the things that I always need to challenge myself on. And so if I feel like I'm listening to where God's got me at that moment in time and following through on where I'm getting convicted, I think that's what success looks like. And I know that's really squishy and not defined, which I don't like all that much, but I think it's true. And it requires that, I think, at the phase of life we're in, to be able to balance well all the different places that you're trying to define success as a husband, as a father, as a leader in your business. So I know that's squishy, but ultimately I think success and fulfillment have to be intertwined. And for me, that direction has to come from God and from Scripture. That's what I'm trying to define success as much as I want to chase after these things of this world and have these defined measures. That's what I'm trying to lean in on every day. And that's not easy for me, because I want to pursue the granular number, 10% growth, 20%, whatever it is, right? And my staff will argue back with me that I've got plenty of that in me, but I don't think that's how I'm going to define success.
Thanks for breaking that down. And also thank you for your time, Tyler, over this last, hour together, really opening up and being real, raw, and truthful about your story and kind of what some of the things excited you as you were young, kind of the people that poured into you and how you took that into your time at Calvin, your marriage, and into the journey that you're on right now with First Tee. I wish you the best of success in the future. And it's been awesome having you here. So thanks again for being on.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate the opportunity.